Good afternoon. It's great to be back here at Greek House Davos 2024. Hey guys, we're trying to have a panel. Can we be respectful of our panelists? Thank you. I'm Rhett Power. I am a Forbes writer and journalist. I also run a company called Accountability Inc., which maximizes human potential and leadership potential. Now, it is my pleasure to be back at Greek House Davos to moderate this panel on such an important topic that affects us all across Europe, across Asia, across Africa, and across North America. Now, what we're going to do today is I'm going to have the panelists briefly introduce themselves, 1 or 2 minutes, no speeches, so that we can get to the hard questions and get to your questions ultimately, because this is going to be an interactive panel. So we're going to do 2 or 3 questions with the group. I think these questions are going to be engaging and are going to warm us up, and then I want you guys to participate. And at you and back, if you would please limit the conversation, I would appreciate it. Okay, so let me start here. I'm going to tap my friend here on the shoulder, and I'll let him introduce himself.
1, 2. Yeah. So I'm Dorian Ducka, former Deputy Energy Minister and Industry of Albania, former advisor to the Albanian Prime Minister. Currently, I advise different governments on energy diplomacy, back-channel diplomacy, and other issues in Middle East and Eastern Europe.
Hi everyone, my name is Valentin Gvozdiy. I'm from Ukraine. I'm a chair of Supervisory Board of the second largest producer of electricity in Ukraine, Ukrhydroenergo. Our part in the energy mix of Ukraine is about 15%. So today I will be happy to share this discussion with my colleagues around the world. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Admiral retired Apostolakis. I was ex-Minister of Defense, ex-Chot of Greece, and ex-Chief of Navy. So I'm here to discuss a little bit about the energy security and the impact of energy security. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Riccardo Lambiris, third year here, so I'm delighted to be here. I'm the chairman of the Athens International Airport. Prior to that, I was CEO for the privatization agency, and before that 23 years, I was an investment banker.
My name is Volker. I'm a former diplomat. I had served as U.S. ambassador to NATO and U.S. special representative for Ukraine negotiations. I also led the McCain Institute for International Leadership for several years, and now do my own private consulting work.
Thank you for those introductions. So the impact of energy on international security and the security landscape is a massive problem. And so I would like for you guys, for all of you, to share with us what you think those challenges are. What are the most complex challenges? And what are the bright spots? And what are the minefields that we're looking at over the next few years? And let's start on the end with Ambassador Volker, and then we'll come back around.
All right. Well, I hope I give an answer to your question here, because I had a few thoughts that I wanted to put out. First off, the topic here, impact of energy on the international security landscape. I think there are 4 basic impacts to look at. One of them is resource transfer. So if you think about Russia being empowered financially to attack Ukraine, a lot of that is coming through its sale of energy. Same with Iran, and you can see this in the world. The second is creating a function of dependence for those countries that need energy resources. And just think back to the time when we were talking about Nord Stream 2, and it was actually deterring European policy from supporting Ukraine actively at that time. The third thing is that there's so much money sloshing around in energy transfers that it also becomes a source of corruption and a means of corrupting decision-making as a result of financial corruption. So we have to watch out for that. But then the fourth thing, and I want to land on a positive here, is that energy can also become a means of integration. And to take the Ukraine example again, by integrating the electricity grid of Ukraine with the European Union, it is actually providing providing a stability and security and a revenue source for Ukraine that didn't exist before Russia's invasion. So there are many different ways in which energy is actually determining the security landscape. And the challenge for policymakers, is what your question was, is to actually look at this and see it as a long-term decision-making chain. We are often driven by short-term decisions, mostly price-based decisions. Look at the U.S. and our focus on keeping gas prices low at the pump. That is driving bad long-term decision-making.
Amen to that.
So just building on what you said, I look at the issue in three dimensions. So there's resilience, there's sovereignty, and there's robustness. So robustness is about your energy infrastructure, so being robust, so you don't have shortages, you don't have outages, and that's to do with each country in itself. You also have robustness in terms of meeting demand supply. So, for instance, if you have a growing GDP, you have to plan ahead and have enough power to support your economy. When you come to resilience, it's all about being able to counteract climate change, technology change, regulatory change. But I think the most interesting one is sovereignty, effectively where, for instance, you have one country which limits water flowing into another country, so the dams are not working that much. Or, for instance, they stop providing gas, so on and so forth. But there's a new twist that has recently come about, at least I saw it, and there's a very good example with Pakistan. Can we please not speak?
Can we quiet the back down, please?
Thank you. So now there's also the corporate sector, which is actually crippling companies. And if you look at what happened in Pakistan, there was two companies, one which was Swiss and the other Italian. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to say the names, which had contracts to deliver natural gas to Pakistan. Now, when the Ukraine crisis came up, they looked at their contracts and decided that it was a good idea to sell it on the spot market rather than delivering the contracts to Pakistan. That meant the actual Pakistani economy got crippled. There was factory closures, fertilizer problems. There was people who lost their jobs. And this actually created a huge risk for Pakistan and a political issue. So, the answer, for instance, to end on a positive again, is diversifying our energy sources, investing in renewables, and also then the question comes on how do you store the energy. So I'll stop there for now.
Minister.
Yes, we know all of us the situation, and especially the situation what happens after the invasion of the Russia in Ukraine. And now with the war that is existing and continues in Israel and Gaza. So the sustainability and the support of energy resources and the economy of the countries is something very, very difficult. As we discussed before, the money that they are on this table are a lot of money, especially in transferring the energy. So at the moment we have a very huge problem in the Red Sea with the Houthis to produce so big mess in the transferring of the energy mainly from the area. So a lot of companies, transferring companies with the ships, has decided to don't pass through the Suez Canal. So I see today that only the 20% of the ships are moving through this area. The problem mainly is to secure and find alternate solutions for the energy, and this pressure is always shows and push all the countries around globally to the alternate energy solutions. So I'm stopping here because the subject is too big. I cannot start from somewhere, but we're coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Speaking about Ukraine and speaking about global scale, we understand that energy security is a vital part of geopolitical security. And unfortunately, we now see in Ukraine the great example of ignoring the importance of that. We failed in many ways. But not only Ukraine failed, we also can see the major fail of Europe, who never made a model. Nobody wanted even to believe that something can change, that energy will have such huge impact back also on politique, because European leaders actually suffered a lot from losing their popularity when people had to pay for gas more than they got used to that. And it was a great dilemma what to choose cheap Russian gas or and accept all those terrible behavior, all this war, or to support their politicians and pay more. And I can tell you that this dilemma was not so clear, was not so obvious. It was difficult for European people to decide. And we in Ukraine now learned our lesson very well, trust me. I'm a chair of supervisory board of the second largest producer of electricity, and my term in the office actually right now running in the event of this terrible war. So we're suffering from the first day from Russian attacks. We actually, our infrastructure of our enterprise, we run in 10 stations all over Ukraine with the total capacity 6,000 gigawatts. It's a huge amount of electricity. It's a very important role in the energy mix of Ukraine because we are maneuvering, we also balancing the electricity market. And I can tell you that our stations were hit 50 times by Russian missiles. And Putin officially announced that energy sector of Ukraine is their target because they believe if energy sector will be destroyed, Ukraine will be more vulnerable. Ukraine will be more ready to negotiate. I can tell you now that energy security now is a second in a line after military in our country. Today, military is number one, energy is number two. And it's all connected. Unfortunately, previous decades, we can see on the scale of the world scale that energy security contribution to geopolitical security model, if it exists, I don't know, was driven by money, was driven by oil producers, was driven by gas producers, and politicians, to my mind, that's my opinion, paid very, very low attention to what can happen. This is a good lesson for all of us. We have to learn, and of course we will have more time to discuss it, but that's what I wanted to highlight, that energy security, which we are talking about today, is a much more in our lives that we can imagine. It's everyday life for us, so it's very important. Thank you.
Well, as the distinguished colleague mentions that energy and security are interlinked, and we are right now in crossroads, looking at also at the recent attacks from the Houthis on the Red Sea. But basically, what I see as an importance in the connection between energy and security, we need to focus on diversification. Diversification that we can be able to get into cheap energy, but this diversification needs to be geographical. So like the energy and all the countries do not rely on one or two or three big producers of energy. We need to diversify the alternate energies so that we do not rely only on fossil fuel or coal or gas, but also put a lot of money, but put the money wisely and not in a rush that we burn this cash. And the diversification of the routes that we should not rely only on one pipeline like Germany did the mistake, even though I was one of the negotiators for the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, but it was too small to challenge the dependence of EU on that gas. So through diversification and the access to alternate resources, alternate geographical and alternate routes, I think all of us could increase the energy security by making sure that malignant actors will not be able to weaponize the energy of supply or the energy transport.
Thank you for those answers. as this discussion goes further, what I kept thinking about and going back to in my mind is what happens after this war is over in Ukraine. And so I would like you to pull out your crystal ball and just give us what that landscape might look like. Does Russia come back into the fold and become a partner in energy and security? Or are we headed for more difficult times where that's not the case and we have a different scenario? What do you think plays out here? Because I think Russia is a big player, a big contributor to the energy sector, and for Europe particularly. And so what does this look like after the war? Can we look to a future where Russia is back into the international community and a good actor on the world stage and an energy contributor in Europe and globally? And I'll let anybody start that wants to jump in.
Maybe, yeah. Actually, we believe definitely for sure that war will end, and every year we're closer to the end of the war. But the main question...
What makes you think that?
Because it's our life. Every day we're closer to the end of the war. Every war has its end and has its beginning. But my next comment is, we don't know what will the end of the war look like, how it will look like. That's why we need to be ready. Ukraine decided its way. We choose the European path. We made a lot of things, and today in Brussels, Ursula von der Leyen said we answered Ukrainian call and we start the screening process. What does it mean, the screening process? Screening process means that all Ukrainian legislation, all processes will be checked carefully next few months. And after that, it will be a lot of recommendations and a long way to go, because we need to do a lot. But what we can say, now we can live without Russian energy resources. European Union...
Do you think that that'll be part of a negotiated close to the war, some sort of energy agreement?
I am not politician and I'm not in the position to comment that, but as a representative of energy sector, I can tell you that we can live without Russia easy. If we invest more in renewables, if we create better investment and legislative environment, and now we have a lot of support from around the world, a lot of initiatives, different hubs who provide transition of Ukrainian energy sector, we can be built in a new way which will give us certain independence and complete independence from Russia. Because we need to calculate other threats, not only from Russia.
Right.
We can expect other threats, and you can. It's not a topic which we should discuss today, but every country should consider any kind of threats, because we live normal life and we think it's not about us. Yes, we have good security situation, but believe me, tomorrow everything can change. And energy security in the basis of those future plans which your countries build as their general plan for future security. So we can live without Russian resources. If Russia will play on the world market with their resources, it should treat it fairly. As for Ukraine, we don't want cheap gas anymore. It's enough. We are ready to pay fair price to be independent. And that's the reason. The same problem in Europe. Germany had very beneficial, let's say, price for the gas. Now, Germany is the second largest supporter after United States against Russia in this war in Ukraine. Officially, it was announced yesterday. So now they understood how important to invest into security, into energy security.
I think
that was my answer.
I think the point that I would take away from that is you don't want cheap gas because you want the freedom and the no strings attached with Russia. And I think that's an important point for probably all of Eastern Europe and the rest of Europe, I would imagine. I think Ambassador was next, and then I'll come back.
Those always first. Always first.
Well, I can be brief, though, and I'll pick up on what we just heard. But number one, to your first question, there is no going back to Russia business as usual in energy consumption in Europe. Europe has already adjusted away. It is already committed now to green energy targets in Europe, and Russia has lost this lever. It has lost this opportunity. Second, Ukraine will become a substantial energy exporter and actually be part of the solution for the EU achieving its green energy objectives. It'll be exporting green electricity, hydrogen, it'll be producing wind electric power, solar electric power, and so forth. So Ukraine actually becomes a net energy producer. And third, when we're looking at fossil fuels and the transition, interestingly, already under President Biden, U.S. fossil fuel production has gone up and is replacing and some of what's had been out there in the world and is bringing prices down a little bit. If we do see a new Republican administration, that will increase, and you'll see the U.S. playing a larger energy role in the future.
So I won't tell you what's going to happen with Russia or not. What I'll tell you about is what Greece did and is doing, and also what I think Europe could be doing. So the first is we're trying to become an energy hub, and to a certain extent we've been doing very well about that because we've put many more entry points. So for instance, piped gas is now being replaced by LNG. So we've got offshore FSRUs bringing in gas, which is often American, Qatari or wherever. So our dependence on just one supplier, for instance, Russia, has been cut out. We are laying interconnectors with other countries, both in Africa, both in Israel, and so on and so forth for electricity. So again, you're diversifying your flows of electricity, of gas, or whatever the resources are. Now, last year I was here and I met actually Oliver Stone, which was a great one for me. And he was actually trying to promote his film, which has been sabotaged, by the way, by all the big film industries, because he was talking about nuclear, right? Nuclear energy is key for me to achieving our renewable targets and also an interdependence and energy security. And the reason is it's the only, I think, scalable fuel that can give us, quote-unquote, clean energy for the long term at sustainable prices. So getting back as Europe into the nuclear field is very important. The problem we have here is that for the past 25 years or so, we have had no new plants in Europe or more generally the Western world, and our technicians and know-how is gradually depleting. So we need to get people in, we need to see it. And, you know, we have the technology today to make it much, much safer. It's obviously a taboo that it's dangerous. We have Fukushima more recently, Chernobyl. Okay, but now I think, you know, we have much, much safer ways of doing it, and we can make smaller plants, but many more. So effectively, the 2 points I was making is diversify your energy sources and try and get sources which, you know, are self-sustainable. And of course, renewables, which, as you know, is the way to go. But you have to store that energy as well. And we all know where 90% of cobalt and all the other minerals, who holds these. So I'll stop there.
Minister?
Yes. All of us knows that there are consumers of the energy. All the countries need the energy, and the countries who produce energy is always very, very important and always earn a lot of money because of that. So the problem is not solution by one the countries. Is a global problem, as we know, and the confrontation between the huge two powers, the United States, the West, and the Russia on the other side, is something that always produce the tension and the necessities of security, the energy. I remember last year I had here a discussion, and I said that in East Mediterranean, and especially in the area of Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, Greece, and the energy resources are a lot. So we have to focus on solving the problems we have between our nations there. and produce the energy as soon as possible because we can fill the gap that is existing after the Ukraine invasion from Russia. And it was okay, but they say in the area you have a lot of sun and a lot of wind. So the solution for all of us is the alternate solutions, alternate ways of energy. And I believe we have to focus on that, and all the countries have started thinking that this is the way. Also, probably the nuclear power is something that is not so dangerous at the moment. So let's think about that also.
Dorian.
Well, unfortunately, as we all have learned, history repeats itself. Hopefully that if there will be a peace agreement on the Ukraine after the war finishes, if there will be a peace agreement and fair agreement, at least the West and the big energy-consuming powers will not forget how the Russians have always weaponized the energy. So sometimes our memory of certain countries and certain big corporates is quite short. So first of all, we need to make sure that we don't have short memories of what has happened in case, even if there is a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine to end the war. So we should learn that thing. The other, we should continue, as we said, on the diversification. Don't put all the eggs in one basket. So we should not keep all the eggs in one sort of basket, in one sort of country for cheap energy resources. And the second, we should learn how to protect the energy supply and the routes, not only of countries. NATO should learn not only to protect of countries within the NATO, but also of other countries that are natural allies or that will provide a natural resource and supply in case of when issues go tough. For example, I think that on the story of Israel and Hamas, Russia is a beneficiary for many things. It benefits from the distraction of the story between the invasion that they have in Ukraine. On the second topic is that a lot of investors, if there is a second front between Lebanon and Israel, they would not be willing to invest a lot of money in the energy resources in Levant. So there are many sides of the equation that we need to take into consideration. So basically, we should diversify, should learn from history, and should be able also to protect resources that they are not really related to us, because in the future they could be related to our own security.
Thank you. And I have one more question for the panel, and then I want to involve the audience. We were here yesterday, and we had the CEO of Volvo, and he talked about by 2030, all of his cars are going to be electric cars. We're here at the World Economic Forum, and we're talking about climate change, and we're talking about reducing our dependence on oil. And I wonder what happens in a decade when we have maybe moved more towards electric vehicles and we're consuming less fossil fuel, less oil. Does that create a security problem in the Middle East, in the countries where we're producing lots of oil and their economies are dependent on it? And those are regions that are very volatile and would be a disaster for us internationally to have security issues. Even in my own hemisphere in North America with Venezuela, and in the United States, what's that going to cause? What kind of economic security issues will that cause in the United States too when we have less dependence on that? Is that a threat? Is that a real issue? Something we should be thinking about?
If I can start personally, since also I work a little bit with friends in Middle East and with the Saudis, it will take its own time to move from fossil fuel to electric cars. But at the same time, I don't think that the countries in Middle East will be affected as much as some other countries where the cost to produce oil is way higher and is not as cheap as in Middle East. Because as these countries will transition and will diversify their economy, at the same time, a lot of oil will be will be needed for oil byproducts, for the petrochemical industry. So the formula, and also from what I hear from their economists and strategists, I think that they still see themselves on the safe side, but they are trying to get into this window of opportunity. But on the other side, of course, we will start having less energy security issues on the oil production, but we'll start having fights for lithium and for rare earth elements resources. So we should see that sometimes the solution of one problem will become a problem on its own, and there will be future potential wars or question marks on the security resource concern. It will just change the world from fossil fuel to rare earth elements or to lithium.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Dear moderator, you just asked if it will create security problem. It will, but those who in the center of those potential problems, for example, Middle East, who are
even Russia. I mean, even
Russia, they already realize that. And latest COP in this year just demonstrated all readiness of the rest of the world for those big changes. And if we're talking about electric cars, for example, it's not something new. 100 years ago, electric cars existed, but it was not so popular because, why? Because nobody was interested. Everyone wanted to sell more oil and gas. Nobody was care about our future, about our global warming problem, etc., etc. Now it's time to use alternative energy source. Personally, I'm a big believer not into electric cars, but into hydrogen-driven cars. Why? Because hydrogen is energy. This is also electric cars. Hydrogen is a way to store energy. This is energy converted into gas. Simply done. But plus of that is that we will not kill our planet by digging all those natural resources to build batteries. To utilize batteries, it takes even more money, time, and harm to our environment than to use fossil fuel. That's why, again, we're coming back and back to the importance of energy in general, because energy is the basis for future sustainable living of our people on the earth. We will use electricity in our mobility on a huge scale, including airplanes. It will happen very soon. It's already tested, and now we are talking about global market of new product, hydrogen. That's the future. Thank you.
Minister?
Yes, I believe that the countries who have technology and they can produce also the parts for the electric cars, or they can produce or sell energy on any kind of energy. They can isolate the damage that is going to be caused because of the normal hydrogen energy. So we believe, and everybody knows, that this is the direction. We have to find alternate solutions in energy, because also the security and the reasons to have different ways of support, or because as we discussed before, that the energy is, as somebody says, is 10% economically and 70, or 30% economically and 70% politically reason. So it's very, very complicated and very, very difficult to be so effective in this way. We see that the problem for security was very, very serious with the invasion of the Russians, and start to be double times, maybe more times difficult when the war in Israel started. And unfortunately, we don't know how this war will finish. We are worried about splitting all this problem in the area with other countries evolving. So I think all of us believes that we have to focus and put our efforts mostly on finding ways have alternate solutions of energy as soon as possible. Of course, there is a time that we need to adapt all this technology, and all the country has to adapt also in this kind of direction.
Okay, so I'm a petrol head, so anything I say you take with a pinch of salt. So to start by your question rate, I think, as my colleague said as well, it's going to take time. I mean, oil will be here for the years to come. I mean, you alluded to Jet A1. Jet A1, the first hydrogen plane is to be ready supposedly by 2035, right? So we've got a lot of time to be there, and hydrogen to become, economically, again, lots has to take place. So oil will be there. The other thing which is interesting is if you look at the Houthi situation, you'll see that the oil prices have more or less, by and large, remained stable. However, the freight prices on the ships have gone sky high. So, we have a market which is not working now. And I think that's an interesting point to take around and see how it's going to go forward. So, to build on what you were saying earlier, I don't believe in electric cars. I think it's just a transition into hydrogen. I truly believe in hydrogen, and this is the way to go. However, we need to have our green energy, which will support the production of electricity for electric cars, if you will, or for hydrogen production for hydrogen cars. So it's very important to get this in mass. And again, that's where security comes in and diversification, right? So I think it's not going to be a major issue for the Middle East in the near to medium term. Also because they have seen this risk and they are preparing for it. Think of what Saudi is doing, right? They're building this huge project. You see Dubai, they are, doing tourism industry and so on and so forth. So I think, there's going to be stability because they're gradually shifting their economies and the way they operate.
What's the time frame? I mean, I know there's a lot of progress on hydrogen, and I know that there are a lot of companies here talking about it and working on it. What is our time frame? And I agree with you. I think it's electric vehicles are a bridge to that next stage. What does that time frame look like, you think? I mean, 2035 is an arbitrary number.
Well, let me put it differently. Toyota, for instance, had taken the hydrogen route. They had hydrogen cars. They didn't have any electricity cars. And they made electric cars because they had to stay in the market, right? So hydrogen technology is there for cars, for instance. For airplanes, it's a different story. It's much more complicated. You're in there. There's, When
does it hit mass, though? When does it hit mass retail where I can go buy a hydrogen car and be able to...
You can buy it today.
I know, but I can't. Can I use it?
Well, you can, but it's uneconomical, right? So
right.
The question is, when do we feel that hydrogen is going to be economically viable? That's $1 million question, right? I mean, who knows? Ideally, the latest
decade,
the latest research I read was about in a decade. But is that wishful thinking or not? I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
Just one simple point, Dorian and Riccardo already made it, but we're not going to hit a cliff. So we talk about 2030 or 2035 or whatever, but it's going to be a long transition. We're not going to hit a cliff. There will be both in our own most developed countries a transition, and then globally, when you think about all the countries in the world, they're still going to be using a lot of fossil fuels as well. So it's not going to create any real dramatic side effects.
Slowly, a slow change that's going to help people adapt and adopt to the change. Okay. Audience, questions? Thoughts, statements? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for your comments. I'm in the shipping industry, and one of the future fuels that is talked about a lot, and we're seeing a lot of interest and investment in, is ammonia. And that didn't come up at all in the panel. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. From a safety standpoint, our team works in the engine room. I'm concerned about the safety aspect of that with techs not being trained on that kind of technology.
Can you fill us in a little bit? And I don't know anything about that.
What is your thoughts on the future?
Is ammonia not conversion into hydrogen?
Just
No,
the
it's a side
ammonia.
product. I can answer this question.
you.
Okay, okay. Ammonia is the same answer as for production of hydrogen, because if you produce hydrogen, it's a side product. It's just chemical process. Ammonia can be produced as a green substance using electricity. We can believe it or not, but it will change the future landscape. And let's just imagine why we always talking about renewables. Because renewables mostly, if we're talking very, very generally, are for free. Sun is bright, it's shining, wind is blowing, etc., etc. But we need something also sustainable, because in the night we don't have sun. When there is no wind, no production. Yeah, so we need something like hydropower, for example, which I represent, which is green, but it works always as long as we have water, and it's very fast. And it's very productive, very efficient. But also, we need to think about other more substantial generation facilities like nuclear generation. And Ukraine, who else like not Ukraine can discuss nuclear generation? All our energy mix was 61% contained on nuclear generation. But we also talking today about security. Chernobyl. We had this terrible catastrophe, and we still feel the consequences of that. Another problem, our station in Zaporizhia, which was hijacked by Russian last year, it was half of our generation. Half. When we lost a half of our generation, we felt it immediately. We were blacked out. That's the answer to the question of our discussion today, security. All these issues have to be diverse. Answering your question, production ammonium. We need to discuss also more carefully the color of this ammonium. Green, pink, whatever. Today, if we're talking about hydrogen, for example, everyone wants green hydrogen because it does not create problems for our environment. But also, a lot of discussions now that hydrogen produced using energy from nuclear is pink. Is it good or bad? I don't have answer. But yes, production of ammonia will increase from the energy. And if we're talking about economical basis, it's only transition period right now. In Europe, Germany, #1 country, which already demonstrate how to manage the problem. So security problem created demand for solution, and they find that solution. Today in Germany, you can fuel your car, a hydrogen car, in every gas station, because absolutely simply, every gas station seller installed hydrogen box on their unit, and you just can fuel your car everywhere the same way. But hydrogen-driven car can drive almost 2,000 kilometers right now on those cells. Which electric car can do the same? But both of them using electricity, that's it.
Any other questions out in the audience?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank the gentleman for sharing with us. I came a little late, so I don't know if my question is still appropriately in the matter. My question is to the head of the United States government. Is it so, Mr. Volker? Right?
Head of the United States government?
Head of the... Probably sometime. So to the head of for the negotiations, that's what I was talking about. And my question is that will we still have peace in Ukraine this year? How far are the negotiations and the unofficial channels and so on and so forth?
Right. So I'll be very brief, but so the F up there is former U.S. Special Representative. It's very hard to see, but it's F for former. And secondly, there is no chance of a peaceful solution, a peaceful end to the war in Ukraine that I can see as long as Vladimir Putin is in power, because he has made it clear that his objective is to eliminate Ukraine as a sovereign, independent country. He doesn't believe they have a right to exist. He has committed himself to an imperial conquest. He actually used the word conquest in a press conference yesterday. And he feels that he is He has gained territory on the ground, and he can sustain and rebuild and continue to try to take more territory. So for Ukraine, there's no way you can live with this. Your homes, your families, your neighbors, your territory, it's being taken away. You have to fight to defend yourself. And I think there is a clear commitment on the part of the U.S. and the European Union countries, NATO countries, many others in the world, Japan, to continue to help Ukraine to defend itself. So as long as Putin is in power, I don't think you'll have a negotiated peace. When you have a defeat of Russian forces where they feel that they cannot go on anymore, I think that will cause some change in Russia, and I think that will also create the opportunity then to find a peace.
Thank you.
So there would be no further diplomatic solution to. I was in a business meeting.
Microphone.
I was in a business meeting last week with a foreign council, and we talked about it. And it seemed to the people, it seemed to all of us in the meeting that we found it very pitiful that the whole world is coming together, like here in Davos, but we wouldn't find any solution to a problem that concerns us all.
So I am gonna cut you off because we were actually talking about energy and security,
Yeah.
and not the politics of the Ukraine war, and I hate to do that.
Yeah.
But are there any other questions about energy and security and the topics that we talked about here today? Sorry to cut you off, but that was
Maybe
the topic
we
today.
can
Thank
continue
you.
our self-conversation later.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay.
Maybe if no question, we can contribute a little bit. We still have time or not?
We've got 5 minutes we can play with. If you guys want to do a closing,
Okay.
give everybody a chance. A 1 minute
If you
final
allow-
word.
if you
a
allow.
rapid round. A 1 minute closing.
Okay, thank you. So, dear colleagues, actually, if we're talking about global security and energy security as a part of it, we first of all need to think about domestic issues, because everything starts at our houses, everything starts at our countries, at our governments. Every country should think about its own independence in the matter of energy security. Right now, we learned, as I said at the beginning, the lesson that it's good to be decentralized. It's good to have diverse generation of the energy. It's good to have opportunity to be connected to someone who is not Russia. It's good to develop renewable sources of energy. It's good to develop storages. And now what we are doing, we hiding all electro and energy generating facilities under the earth. That's our experience, which we share in. And of course, political leaders need to pay more attention to energy security in the general security landscape. Money should not be a driven power building that security. That's my position. Thank you.
Dorian, final word?
Well, I mean, the final word is that we should be always agile, that to do the maximum to prevent malign actors from weaponizing the supply of energy or distorting the energy supply routes.
Thank you. Ambassador? Or Minister?
Yes, we know that if somebody is always the huge producer of energy, and if there is a need always to buy energy, so this country or this organization is going to be dependent, or we are going to be dependent from this organization. Now we are on the way to be dependent from Russia. And this is something that we have to continue, I believe. Otherwise, finishing the war in the Ukraine, because there are a lot around who wants the energy from Russia, they will continue to buy on freeway, and they will come back. So it's very, very important to think about. And of course, I believe that the energy security is not only economical matter, it's mainly political. And all of us and globally we have to support our countries and our societies on having sustain of and security of energy in all the way, because this is our daily life. We cannot live without energy. Finally,
Ambassador.
Well, I'll just briefly touch your question one more time because I'm going to have to leave after this. But essentially, the war could end tomorrow, and there would be peace if Russia would stop attacking Ukraine and get its forces out of Ukraine. But Russia's not going to do that. And so there isn't a diplomatic pathway right now as long as Russia has the military forces it has and is willing to use them. No amount of meetings in Istanbul or between Ukrainian and Russian representatives or anyone else is going to fix this as long as Putin feels he has military force and is willing to use it to attack Ukraine. So it's very sad, and the Ukrainians are paying a very high price for this. But that's the reality we face, and that's why it's important to change the balance of forces, to force Russian forces into a defeat in Ukraine so that you can get to the point where Putin is actually willing to stop the war.
Okay. Final word.
Okay, so I spoke about resilience, about robustness, about sovereignty. And I think the latest study I saw, out of 130 countries which were put to the test on these three metrics, most of them actually failed, at least in one. And what's most interesting is that the low GDP countries were the ones that failed mostly. And I think in this world where, the main factors are changing, so we're moving from fossil fuels to renewables, we're moving from diversity of supply, from, we used to take Russian gas, we're not taking it anymore. We have shale gas, which has brought in a new dimension. All of this is changing the landscape in a way that is very hard for countries to adapt. So it's very, very important that each single government, as you said, each single country rethinks very carefully over the next 15 to 20 years how it's going to shape its energy and electricity sectors to make sure that they're up to the challenges that are going to come, because I can tell you there'll be very many. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for staying around. We have and I would encourage you to stay around even longer, because the next panel is fascinating. We're going to be talking about rethinking the ports as hubs, the strategic importance for Greece, the Balkans, and Europe. I think we have the former Prime Minister now in the room from Bulgaria, and he will be on the panel as well. So please stick around. Thank you, panel. And let's get a quick group picture, and then I know you all have tight schedules, so we'll get you out of here.
Thank you, and thank you for great moderation.